Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to Flamingo Up, the podcast where we help women rise, reclaim their voice, and take charge of their life and career. I'm Ali, founder of EmpowerHerd, where we support women in overcoming workplace challenges through coaching and community. Each week, we dive into real issues with expert advice and inspiring stories to help you shift from victim to victor. Today, we are talking about one of those tricky subjects, workplace friendships that become confusing and sometimes even harmful. Let us flamingo up, gorgeous. As I mentioned, today's topic is one of many that we can relate to. Recognizing signs of workplace bullying and navigating the frenemy zone when workplace friendships turn toxic. These dynamics can be subtle, like office gossip, backhanded compliments, or exclusion from meetings. These small signs of covert bullying can deeply impact your confidence, mental well-being, and productivity. Oh my gosh. Joining me today is Dr. Amber Bartlett, a powerhouse in the world of communication expertise. She's not just another consultant. She is a doctor of psychology, a former corporate executive, a serial entrepreneur, and the brains behind Strength Point Consulting. Amber knows what it takes to transform businesses into thriving industry leaders. Using her unique strategies based on the power of communication, her unique blend of psychology, leadership, and hands-on business experience is exactly what you need to stand out in your market. Welcome, Dr. Amber Bartlett.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have you here. If you're ready, let's just dive straight in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I do have a question for you.
hmm
Why do you think workplace friendships sometimes turn harmful or competitive? And why is it so confusing for the person experiencing it?
A great question. I think when you are in the workplace, there is this inherent career pressure, right? To advance, to be promoted, to be the best. And it can sometimes turn into one of those may the best man win. And you have that competition. So when you have a friendship or friends, and now you're in this competitive environment, it's easy for those boundaries to get blurred. You have that pressure, to prove oneself. And I think sometimes you can subconsciously almost start to compare yourself even to your friend or, to the other people that you work with. And if this competition, especially if it's true for only one side of the friendship, then the one that's not competitive, they're going to be confused and kind of hurt by it because they don't understand, right? They're thinking of it like, well, you're my friend.
Hmm.
And why all of a sudden is this feeling competitive or harmful, or just kind of overall yucky in the workplace? When you start off as friends and then you get into that workplace environment, it's just like I said, it's gray, it's murky, and it opens up, I think, that opportunity for things to come in that if you just stayed outside of work, you wouldn't have the same experiences.
That's really interesting. Do you think maybe sometimes it comes down to insecurities?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times, whether we're talking about friendships or not, right? When you're in the workplace and you have anyone who is ultra competitive or, turns out to be very aggressive or, authoritarian like that, a lot of that stems from insecurity. It's the same with any bullying. We're talking about workplace bullying, but think about any bullying. The bully is usually a bully because they're insecure. They're bullying others for things that they have insecurities about or things that they've been bullied about. So it's the same. It's the same in this situation.
I just want to pull on that thread and ask you a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
How can someone tell if they're being too sensitive or the colleague's behavior is genuinely toxic?
Another great question. You're full of them today, Allie. Um, so, I think one of the things is to think about, is what you're experiencing consistent? Is it persistent? Is this a one-time thing where maybe you disagree on a topic and things got heated and, you had maybe a disagreement? Or is this something where you're starting to recognize that this person is consistently humiliating you in front of other people, or consistently making these hurtful or cutting comments, or consistently just showing a lack of respect, for you in the workplace? I think that is really a big differentiator, because there's a difference between one-offs and then, this consistent behavior that feels toxic. And I think another thing that I always say is that if you find yourself constantly being on guard, or feeling drained, or feeling uncomfortable around this specific person, there's more than likely a reason for that. And it's not going to be just a one-off situation.
Isn't it interesting that your body will tell you something's off before your mind catches up with what's happening?
Absolutely. Yep. That happens a lot. It happens in a lot of situations. You have people that are chronically ill, or they can't figure it out. And doctors are like, we can't find a reason for this. And it stems back to an environment that's toxic, or a situation, that they've been pushing down, and it becomes physiological.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
why does this kind of toxic behavior often feel hard to call out or address directly?
I think a lot of times, when we're talking about toxic behavior or toxic people in general, they are known for using manipulative techniques, right? Or manipulative tactics.
Mm.
These can be like gaslighting or victim blaming. And in turn, that makes the victim, or the person who is experiencing, the bullying or toxic behavior, start to doubt themselves. They start to doubt their perceptions, or they start to feel responsible for the toxic person's, behavior. I mean, this could be something as simple as, hey, I noticed I was left off the last few emails about this project. And the person in response says, oh, that was a simple mistake. Don't be paranoid. It's not like you're being left off, on purpose. So they're turning it around to make you feel like, oh, yeah, I don't want to be that crazy paranoid person. I'm sure it was just a mistake. But once that again becomes consistent, then it's like, no, that's something else. But I think it's hard to address because of the manipulation that you experience with the toxicity, if that makes sense.
It does, because I lived it and I understand exactly where you're coming from. It was all those nuances that
Hmm.
came into play that you can't put together. So therefore, how do you really address the situation that's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sneaky.
Yeah. What's one thing that someone can do to stop internalizing this behavior and start to regain clarity?
Well, first of all, it has to be intentional, right? This is something you have to get to the point where you're intentionally stepping back, recognizing, wow, this is something that I'm experiencing. It's not who I am. I'm not the cause of it. I think getting back to the roots of our own self-worth, right? That's what's going to mentally help you. So by focusing on your achievements and your gifts and your talents, what makes you you, that is what's going to help you to be able to kind of mentally combat, the negativity or the toxic behavior. But I'm not going to lie, it's hard. It has to be an intentional effort, that you recognize and, put effort into.
Absolutely. It's got to be in your conscious mind, right? You've got to bring it forward from your into your conscious. You have to be aware of the situation that's happening and want to make the change.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Because the only person you can change is you. We can't change other people. So
Exactly. I always say that one of the things that I'm infamous for saying, probably annoying the many times, but I always say you can never control someone else's reactions. You can only control yourself and your messaging. You're not ever going to be able to control someone else and how they act or react.
absolutely. And it's so hard for us, I think, we hear it,
Hmm.
but then to really embody that.
Yes. No, very hard, because there's intellect and then there's heart, right?
That's
And
right.
so you can know, I always say that. I'm like, well, intellectually, I know that, but right now, that's not what I'm feeling. This is what I'm feeling. So, yeah, we have to find the connection between the brain and the heart. It's not
No,
always easy.
absolutely not. So,
Yeah.
okay, then how can someone separate their self-worth from the actions of a toxic colleague or frenemy?
I think one of the big things is separation, right? And establishing clear boundaries. I feel like boundaries here are key, and most of these boundaries are actually with yourself, right? So you have to decide what's acceptable to you, what you're going to be willing to accept, what you're not going to be willing to accept. I think spending as much as you can, we're talking about workplace, and I get it, right? Sometimes you have to work with these people, but spending the least amount of time around this person and the least interactions that you can is going to be your best bet to remove yourself, right? And to try to take yourself out of the situations. And I think even when you have to interact, make those as factual and as short as you can, right? So yeah, I think that's it. Another thing that I really like to recommend also around this topic, I'm not a self-proclaimed like woohoo person, but I have found so much success and power with journaling. I think journaling gives you an amazing opportunity to safely and completely honestly just download situations or experiences that you have, right? There's no one to judge. It's your journal, so you're just reading it. And I think that also gives you an opportunity to refocus on yourself and on your self-worth and on your achievements and what you do have good that's going for you. And I think just remembering that your self-worth is not determined by anyone else. It's your self-worth. It's who you are. And so I think, that's, I could go on and on, but yeah, that's just a couple recommendations.
Oh, you're speaking my language, right? I journaled my entire experience. I documented,
Mhm.
and it wasn't because I was documenting the situation. It was the only way I
Yeah.
could show up every day, by
Mhm.
having a download in the morning of everything that was going on through my
Mhm.
head. So,
Yeah.
I've got journals going back all the way through. I don't read
Mhm.
them. I don't need to read them. I lived it. It
Yeah.
was my way of coping without
Mhm.
knowing what was happening, because I didn't know I was being bullied. I just thought my friend had stopped talking to me and turned into, excuse the French, a bitch, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't until 6 years later I could actually realize, because of all these things that were happening, that they mounted to bullying.
Mm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
journaling's really, like, even today, I journal about 6 pages a day. I mean, I have a lot of stuff
Mm.
to download. I'm not
Yeah. So
super
you
happy
totally get
now.
it. Yeah, well, and that's the thing because I think sometimes when you're journaling, we have our conscious and our subconscious, right? And I think sometimes journaling just gives our subconscious that opportunity to come out. And, like you said, you don't need to go back and read 5 years ago what you wrote, but sometimes on a day to day, you'll glance back and, or a week later, right? You'll glance back and be like, oh, like now that makes sense. Now I get that. But it's not something that you're cognizant of in the moment. So that's why I like that free, unloading is what I like to
Yeah,
call it.
absolutely. I also add photos to my journal. So if I've
Oh,
done something really fun, or on the weekend, or a beautiful flower that I've taken a photo of, I actually print it out and stick it in my journal, as it's more like a keepsake now. It becomes
yeah.
something, it's evolved into something that this is a product of my life, and these are the happy and not so happy moments that I
Mm-hmm.
captured through my life, which then also helps me remember certain situations, helps me remember how I was feeling. So when you're opening up a page and there's a photo there, you can instantly
Mm-hmm.
go back to that place.
Yes. I was just going to say that you're combining the brain and the heart because now you have what your brain is downloading, but now those pictures are more of this is how I was feeling, or, this takes me
Hmm.
back to the moment. So yeah, you're doing both. Perfect
Yeah.
journaling.
Oh, I'm glad I got that tick of approval.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's
Oh,
awesome.
so what role does emotional resilience play in navigating these relationships, and how can we build it?
Great question. So I think, first of all, just to clarify, for anyone listening, emotional resilience is your ability to adapt and to cope, right, with any kind of stressful or unexpected or negative situation or experience. So that's what emotional resilience is. And I feel like, especially in these situations, it helps you to be able to recognize harmful behaviors. It helps you to set those healthy boundaries. It helps you to minimize the negative effects of the behaviors that you're experiencing, right? And the very cool thing about it is that you can build it and you can develop it. You know, it's not something you have to be born with. It's a muscle. And so if you focus on it and you build it, it can get stronger. And I think, increasing, we've talked about self-worth, and I also think it's valuable to think about self-awareness. That's one way that you can build your emotional resilience, right? You start to really understand your strengths, your talents, your triggers. You're just self-aware about the situations and experiences that you're in and what your responses are to that. And you can use this information, this self-awareness, to then start to make healthier decisions. And then the other thing I always say is practice, practice, practice. Another part of building this emotional resilience is that you have to practice. You have to practice being more assertive. You have to practice being more kind. You have to be more accepting, practice being more confident. So whatever practicing looks like for you, it is, again, it's any kind of muscle we're trying to build. You have to continue the repetition. You have to continue the practice. And the more emotional resilience you can build, then the easier you'll find it to navigate and be aware of these negative situations.
I really love how you say be more assertive
Mm-hmm.
because, we're victims of workplace bullying and, the covert type where you're not, this person's a friend, but we're not quite sure now. There's some undermining going on. There's something going on in the background. What's a simple way or an example of being assertive without getting them offside? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, I'm glad you called that out because a lot of times even the word assertive is misinterpreted, right? We almost put assertive with aggressive,
Yeah.
and those are two very different things, right? Assertive means that you are speaking up about something that is important to you, something that you feel strongly about, you feel confident in it. And so you're asserting that opinion. It doesn't mean that you go about it aggressively. So to answer your question, let's think. An example could be, let's say that you're in a meeting and, you bring up a point of view and right away there's like a snarky comment made, that just disregards it, in front of everyone, right? And you feel kind of, oh, great, you feel embarrassed that you said something wrong or whatever. So you get through the rest of the meeting. After the meeting, you circle back with this person that did that in the meeting and made the snarky comment. And the conversation can sound like, I'm going to make up a name, Roberta. I don't know Roberta. So, hey, Roberta, I wanted to circle back with you after the meeting. During the meeting, when I brought up point A, I felt like your response was a little harsh and, I kind of felt disregarded, based on how you responded. And it didn't make me feel great. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up to you. If there's a specific reason why that happened, I would like for us to be able to talk about that because I would prefer not to experience that in the future. So that's being assertive, right? I'm asserting what's important to me, how it made me feel, what the behavior was, but I'm not rude. I'm not rude about it. I explain very calmly why I'm having the conversation and what about the situation made me not willing to accept it. Did that help? Does that make sense?
It does, and it brings it right back into when you're approaching somebody with, an uncomfortable feeling that you're having, you make it all about you and how
Hmm.
you're feeling, how it's
Yep.
making you feel. You never make it about them.
Yes, exactly. Well, that takes the emotion out of it, right? Because it's a very different conversation, the example I just gave, as opposed to, hey, Roberta, I want to talk about that meeting that we had because you were really rude and you
Mm.
called me out in front of everyone, and that's just not acceptable. That's a very different conversation, right? That's right away asking for someone's defenses to come up and to make it, conflictive instead of I'm letting you know how I feel and how it affected me. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great call out.
Yeah. Sitting with your feelings and really bringing into the fact that, I feel X because
Hmm.
you said blah,
Hmm.
and really
Yeah.
bringing it back to you. I know that towards the end of my work, sorry, I've got stuff going on. And
Always life.
I know my little co-host here, I'm not sure if everyone can hear him, but he is snoring away like a champion. So,
Amazing.
uh,
Oh, one of mine came and popped her nose up, like, what are you doing, Mom? It's like, go
yeah.
away.
So if anybody doesn't know, I have a Frenchie Leo, and Dr. Bartlett also has 5 dogs, and they just pop in and out of the room while we constantly chat to each other. So it's quite funny that we're
Yeah.
just seeing dogs or hearing dogs snoring. I love how that just made it onto the
I
podcast.
love it.
And like your furry friends are just joining.
Yep.
That's so funny. Now, I'm getting back to what I was saying, and I've completely lost my train of thought, which is quite interesting and quite funny.
We were talking about focusing on how it makes us feel in the
Yeah.
conversation as opposed to them.
So when you're in that situation or approaching that situation, right, what are some of the steps people can take to protect their mental health while continuing to work with that person?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because our first instinct is usually fight or flight, right? So if we've decided we're not going to fight, then we want to run away. Um, I think when it comes to protecting our mental health, I said it already once, but I think really maximizing that degree of separation with this person as much as it's possible, right? You do want to remove yourself from the situation as much as you can. Now, if it's impossible and you have to work closely with this person, that could happen. And I completely understand that. That's really where you have to be diligent about your work around your self-worth and your journaling, your affirmations, right? You have to intentionally remember, I have to work with this person,
Mm,
but their actions and their behaviors are not a reflection of me. They're not a reflection of anything that I am or that I'm doing. It's a reflection of them. And, there's no easy way. I wish there was a button that I could say, push this button and your mental health will be protected and you don't have to deal with this person, but unfortunately or fortunately, it forces us to focus on ourselves, right? And what is good for us and what we're going through. And the other thing that I'll say too, actually, it just popped into my head. A lot of companies now have, I don't know what you call it there, like affinity groups or employee resource groups within companies. And those can be a great opportunity too, to come together, just like a safe place for sharing
mm,
or relating to other employees that are similar to you or, whatever it means. But I think, just seeking out the other opportunities that you have within the workplace to be in a positive environment or have a place to share. I think, that can be a good idea too.
yeah, I'm in my old workplace. My manager at the time sent, I think it was called a lean circle or
Mm,
something like that. And it was all women. And, we got together and we talked about not about bullying, but, we all
yeah,
come from different parts of the organization, but we got together and we were able to explore different ideas and help each other out. Like it was
yeah,
a real
exactly.
positive um, mindset to be in when you entered that room.
Hmm. Yeah, it
Yeah.
gives you a sense of community, a sense of camaraderie and a sense of support. So
Yeah.
that can help.
So what happens if the friendship involves public behaviors like gossip or exclusion in meetings? I mean, we've already discussed how you can address it if, there's a backhanded comment or a snide comment in a meeting. So how do you
Hmm.
address things like gossip or exclusion from meetings, like in
Hmm.
a constructive manner while maintaining professionalism?
Yeah, I think, the bottom line is to remember that it's always okay to take a beat. You don't have to respond to things in the moment, right? We're still at work. We don't want to, I guess, how would you put it? Like put any gas on the fire of what, the
Mm,
other toxic person is encouraging, right? So we want to maintain our professionalism. And so I think going back to the example that we even just talked about, addressing things one-on-one is always recommended over addressing it in front of a whole group of people, right? Because that can come across wrong. And I think, just doing it when you're in the right headspace. So if something happens that makes you feel really emotional or really on, then take a beat. You don't have to address it right then. Wait until you feel a little less emotional and maybe a little more rational, because that's going to produce the most effective conversations and allow you to give the most effective feedback, in a way that's taken the right way.
Yeah, no, I really get that because I used to always respond emotionally, like when you're emotionally
Mm.
charged. And
Yeah.
I like towards at the end when I realized what was happening, and I really started to step my emotions back and engage from a place of no emotion. And my communication became so much more professional and
Hmm.
clean because there was no emotion attached to what was happening then. It was, just me speaking up, voicing my opinion, voicing my concerns, whatever it was at the time, and there was no emotion attached to it.
Yep. No, that's absolutely. And I think, there oftentimes when this happens, right, there comes a time where you want to share what's happening or you feel like you need to share what's happening,
Mm.
whether you share it with your manager or with HR, whatever that looks like. And what you just described is key. You want to focus on the facts. You don't want to say, hey, I need to, talk to you about George. He's a creep and he's making me uncomfortable. Like that's going to come across very differently than, hey, in the last two meetings we've had, George has made what I feel like, are racist jokes and it makes me uncomfortable and I don't feel like it's appropriate. Like that's going to be very different feedback. You see the difference. So the less emotional you can be and the more factual and to the point, the better your feedback's going to be received, if I'm saying that right. It allows the other person to be able to grasp on to what the actual issue is instead of becoming kind of mired down in your emotions, which then blurs what's the actual issue here. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. It makes great sense. So really what we're saying here is, take a breath. You don't need to address it straight away.
Yeah.
You can take some time. And
Yes.
perception is everything. So your perception of that situation right now, feel what you're feeling, think
Hmm.
what you're thinking, and over time, over a period of time, your perception about that will change. Deal with your emotions. Deal with
Yeah.
those feelings right now. Get them out, whether it's through journaling in that moment or going for a run or whatever you do to harness those emotions and then have that conversation where
Yep.
your
Absolutely.
emotions are no longer highly charged. Come
Yes.
in.
Yep.
Did I summarize
Exactly.
that quite well?
You summarized it perfectly. And I wish that I did running to get rid of emotions. That would make me feel much healthier.
Oh, me too.
Not on my favorite list of things to do, but yeah, great
No,
example.
mine either. When should someone consider involving their manager, HR, or somebody else in this frenemy zone? You're still in this, you're not sure what's going on, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, obviously I can give a general recommendation. I think it's going to depend on each situation, but overall, I would say if you've gone through the steps of, coming to the point where you realize this is consistent, it's happening, persistently. You've even maybe had conversations with the person in a professional way, like we talked about, hey, this is happening, it's making me feel this way, and it continues to persist. I think at that point, that's when you want to look for support. You want to go to and talk to HR. I think it's also helpful, before this point, maybe you've been keeping track or keeping record of the incidents, not like a crazy person, but when something happens, you jot it down so that you remember, and then you can look back and be like, okay, this really does seem to be a pattern. And so now, you have, I guess, proof, if you will, and you have your experiences. So I think, yeah, if you've gone through the steps of recognizing it's persistent, you're keeping track, you see there's a pattern, you've tried to talk to them, nothing's changing, it's time to bring in some support.
Absolutely. I'm a huge one for documenting incidents, no matter how small. that those incidents are. Because if you feel uncomfortable, your body's telling you something. So, you know, document the time, the place, who was involved, what was said, and how it made you feel.
Yeah,
I think the big
exactly.
one around that is how it made you feel, because you know it starts. You build a catalog, and hopefully your catalog's not going to be as big as mine was, but you build a catalog of I'm not. This is I'm not. This is real. This is not me, you know, being silly anymore. This is I've got solid evidence of all the times I was made to feel a certain way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've had that in the past, not in, you know, work environment, but a personal situation, right? Even where, you know, I would bring things up and the response was, you're crazy. Like, where do you get this stuff? You know, where do you pull this from? And, you know, it's even, I mean, both of us are intellectual people, but let me tell you, the more you keep hearing that, the more you start to doubt your sanity and you start to think, oh my gosh, is it really me? Like, am I really just being paranoid? And so, you know, I think to your point, when you're able to keep the records, you know, it's sometimes for no other reason than to realize I'm not insane. I have this. Like I see these are happening. It's not just me. So I completely agree with that.
I love that. And I've never actually thought about it like that. So it's not just for evidence. It's
Mm-hmm.
for external evidence. It's for
Self-evidence.
internal evidence. Because I'm always asking people, what evidence do you have of that thought, feeling, or behavior? And it's
Mm-hmm.
usually none. And you've just brought that into a full circle for me, that the evidence I collected, even though I thought it was for external, was actually for me to come to realize what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's huge because we've talked about that and especially, you know, when you're in a situation, I always equate it to this. You know what a mosaic is, right? Like with all the little pieces.
Yeah.
So when you're standing at a mosaic and you're staring at it close up, all you see are the little pieces. All you can see is the broken little pieces. It's not till you're able to step back and see the whole thing that you're able to see the picture that it's making, the whole picture. And that is so true in any of these tough situations that we're in. When you're in it, you're in it. It's hard to see that. And so I think whether it's documenting experiences, journaling your feelings, like all of that just helps you to be able to step back and realize the whole picture, if that makes sense.
I think I've just had a little bit of a light bulb moment, because it's really
Yay.
landing. I know.
Yeah,
I
that's
hope other
awesome.
people are having this light bulb moment too, but for me, this fits perfectly for, like, you know, we're talking about the frenemy zone, and, you know, how do you know whether that's a friend or, you know, where it's moving to? And this is how you know, by
Yeah.
having all that documented evidence. So you could not, this is more than workplaces, right? As you said, it
Oh,
in your
yeah.
personal life, you know, with your
Mm.
friends outside of work. Can be used anywhere if you start feeling and seeing, and, you know, a lot of ways that person's making you feel a certain way, you're giving
Yeah.
yourself evidence of the
Yep.
situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's combined. It's like you talked about earlier with your journal. It's combining your heart and your brain. You know, it's combining the two. So you know how you're feeling, but now your brain's actually able to look at it and say, yep, that aligns. That aligns.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be powerful.
That's like one of the biggest takeaways for me right now, is
Awesome.
just taking that different lens on it, right? We always say, and I'm always saying to people, you know, document to collect evidence. And it was always, you know, that I'm actually sitting here a little bit speechless
Oh.
because of you've just flipped it.
Yay. I love it. Breakthroughs are amazing. That's why we do this, right? We
That's
all have different experiences and expertise. So you like to share.
absolutely. So let's pulling on that like further. What are some other external resources or tools victims can use to understand and navigate these challenges more effectively? So we've got our journaling, we've got our documentation. What are some other ways they can use, like, you know, learning how to be assertive? Is there a tool that they can use for that? You know, boundary setting. Is there a tool that can use for that? All these things that we've talked about, are there some specific tools you would recommend that people get into first?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it depends on where they're kind of sitting in their situation right now, right? So if you're in a situation where you feel like, I know that I'm being bullied, I don't really know where to go from here, it's really overwhelming. There's actually something called the Workplace Bullying Institute. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's in the US. They have a ton of like tutorials and training all around workplace bullying. And the two doctors that started it, they wrote a book too. It's called The Bully at Work. And so those are two recommendations, that I'll just throw out there if you're at, that place. Other than that, and I can send you some so we can put them in the show notes, but, just different, like you were saying around, setting boundaries, right? Or being assertive. I mean, anyone nowadays can go to Google and, do a search, and there's trainings and there's books galore on self-worth, self-awareness, there's a ton of those. And then I can't remember, I wish I could, I'm so annoyed I can't remember the name right now. There's an assessment that you can take. I don't even think you have to pay for it. I'll have to look it up and send it to you. But there's an assessment that you can take that talks about, self-awareness and social
Mm.
awareness and the differences. And I think that's important to understand too, because, you can be self-aware, understanding yourself and your responses and your strengths, but then there's also being socially aware. And that's understanding and being able to, be aware of what's going on around you. How are other people's emotions affecting you? What's appropriate to say or do in this situation. So there's two differentiators there, but that's a pretty powerful one. So I'll look that up and get it over to you.
That would be amazing. I also have a self-love test where people can take, and it's broken down into categories of self-worth, self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and you can
Yep.
actually see where you're sitting in loving yourself. I mean, self-love is just one of those words that we use, right? It's so
Right.
fluffy, and it
Yeah.
reminds me of cotton candy, is what you guys call cotton candy, what we call fairy
Yeah.
floss. Do you know what I
You
mean?
call it what?
Fairy floss.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's hilarious. Fairy floss. I like yours better.
So,
But-
and that you can actually then see where you need to work. Do you need to work on your self-worth, but your self-care is really good? Do you need to work on a different area and start building that muscle to
Mhm.
regain
Yeah.
yourself and, figure out
Mhm.
where you are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you hit on an important point because, like I was just saying, there's a trillion resources
Mm,
out there, for people. And I think not that you need to, and if I get it if you don't know what you don't know, but I think a lot of us in the moment, we're at least able to say, you know what, I really wish I felt more confident. How do I build my confidence, right? Or I wish I knew how to speak up and be more assertive, so you like choose, or identify some of the traits or the behaviors that you want to build or that you wish you had more of, or, wish you could do better, and start there. Just start with one, and then you'll find one that ties into that ties into that. And pretty soon, you'll be able to well round your self-care. But I think, even if you feel stuck, just choose one thing that you wish that you just felt more comfortable or stronger in and start there.
that's so funny and interesting at the same time. So before I knew I was being bullied, I saw a post by a woman I'd been following who I'd met through a leadership course, right?
Mhm.
And her post was courage. I always say it, and now of course, now I need to. I've,
Yep,
now I
happens.
need to know it. I've forgotten it. And her post really hit me in the moment because I felt I was not communicating effectively,
Mm,
if that
mm,
makes, you know what I mean?
mhm.
So I
Yeah.
went to her to talk about communication. And within 2 sessions, I'm sitting there saying, I'm a victim of female to female workplace bullying.
Mhm.
So I went in for one thing,
Yeah.
and from that one thing, unraveled
Mhm.
6 years of covert bullying. So you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. We always go in, if you're in that frenemy zone and you're unsure what's going on, you're going in for something else where
Mhm.
you actually might realize that your friend is actually not a friend.
Mhm. Yep. It happens all the time. Even like with, some of my coaching clients, they'll come in and be like, I need to work on this. This is what we need to work on. And within a session or two, I'm like, no, this is actually what we need to work on. And that's why I think it's so powerful, especially in situations like this, right? To look for that third party objective
Mm,
perspective. It doesn't have to be something that you pay for. It could be another friend. It could be a family member. It could, be just like you said, a colleague or another business connection that you have. But I think getting that outside perspective sometimes turns on lights that we didn't even know were off. And I think it can be very powerful.
absolutely. I mean, I had a client who she knew she was being bullied,
Hmm.
but outside of work, they seemed to be friends, right?
Mm,
So it became this really interesting dynamic. And in the
hmm.
end, I had to say, that person is not your friend.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
and soon as that sentence was said, it was a light bulb moment. That person is not my, would you be friends with that person outside of work? This is my
Mm,
first question. Would you, if you met them in the grocery store, be friends with them? Or are you
mm-hmm.
only friends with them because of work?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question.
If your answer is no, then your colleagues, we try and
Exactly.
work, your colleagues.
Yep. Yeah. No, no, I know. You can't, being friends is I always say too, like when you're truly friends with someone, friendship requires a sense of favoritism, right? I mean, you have to favor this person. You're friends with them.
Yep.
You're choosing them above other people. When you're in the workplace, favoritism doesn't work very well. And so that's why it's really tough, to maintain true friendships in work. It's really hard. It's the same as like I say, I forget what the percentage is, but a lot most of the time husbands and wives should not be in business together. Like you have to keep that separate, right? Because it can be tough. Now there's always anomalies and people that make it work, but yeah, it just, it makes things really murky. You have to be very, very specific with the situation.
And I want people to think about that, right? If you've got a frenemy at work, think about whether if you met them in the grocery store or you met them through other people, would you be friends with them?
Hmm.
Would they be
Yeah.
people that you would allow into your world, wholly,
Hmm.
fully immersed into your world?
Yeah.
The answer is no, then they're a colleague.
Hmm. Yeah. And sometimes that's good. I've
Yeah.
even had experiences in the back where I'm like, oh, I really like working with her. I would never sit on the couch with her and watch TV, but I really like working with her because there's difference. We're all different in different situations.
Absolutely. So
Right.
we'll start to wrap it up because we could go probably
Yeah.
for a long time on
Hours. Yeah.
what should a victim know about the long-term impact of toxic workplace friendships and how can they avoid carrying those effects into future friendships?
Mm. This is a tough one. I think some of the long-term effects, first of all, going through something like this we talked about it earlier, right? It can turn into physiological issues. It can start to affect you physically, right? Ongoing stress. It can lead to heart disease. It can lead to a multitude of physical illnesses.
Mm,
So I think that's something that you have to remember whether you're feeling it now or not if you're in this situation your body is just not meant to sustain this constant source of stress and anxiety. It can cause you mental challenges, right? You can see anxiety, depression, any kind of mental challenges that can come from this situation. And I think one of the biggest ones that hit me, and again, I had a tough personal experience with this, but it can long term affect your trust in other people. It can affect your trust in human beings. You thought this in this situation, you thought this person was your friend, and now they've become the enemy. That's very unnerving. It makes you really start to doubt that you know people at all. And again, we're talking about workplace bullying, but this can be for anybody. But I think once you're out and away from this toxic relationship or toxic environment, which hopefully you eventually find your way out of it. I think it's important to do the work that's required to unravel all of this. I don't think it's as simple as, if you take your story, for example, right? I don't think it would have been as simple as, you know what, I'm done, I'm out, and then move on and just start living life. Like, you have to process this. This is a life altering situation that you're going through, and there's no pressure. And it's totally expected and okay that you need to work through this. You need to process it. You need to unravel it all. Um, so I think it's just that would be the hardest one for me, is the trust in people again. And I think, you just have to realize that this was one person that was negative in your life. It's not every person. And that's tough to do. I can sit here and say it. It's tough to do, but with the right work, you can get there. And that's where you want to get is, don't write off the whole rest of the world because one person was nasty.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And you are right. Like I had to grieve my friendship. I had to then
Mhm.
grieve the loss of myself. Then I
Yep.
had to, bounce back and rebuild basically the person who I was, because I'd lost so much of myself through those 6 years to become the person I am now. And I'm still constantly changing and growing and learning from that experience and from speaking to women like yourself who bring me, different perspectives and different ways of looking at it and light bulb moments. I
Mhm.
documented my entire healing process in a book
Mm.
for other people to be able to go, right, that's the work Ali did. And if I want to get to, heal, I need to go through the work as well.
Yep.
And it's
Absolutely.
not, and it's a commitment. It's not like you said, if I could give you a bell and you could ring it and it would be done,
Yeah.
I would do that.
Yep. Exactly.
It's something you really have to commit to.
Yeah, it is. And it's not going to be easy. Sometimes I think it's a toss up, the experience or the healing, which is tougher because they're both tough. But, I think at least with the healing, that there's a light. You're going towards the light at the end of the tunnel. There's something positive at the end for you. So you have to just keep going.
Yeah. So, how can someone turn this experience into an opportunity for personal growth and professional development?
Great question. And I think our conversation today kind of sums it up, right? I
Yeah.
think, you have to look at it like this is an opportunity for you to really know yourself. This is an opportunity for you to process again, what you went through and realize, what am I willing to put up with? What am I not willing to put up with? Why? Why did this happen? Why did I react or have, the reactions that I did? I mean, the self, just like you were talking about self-love, self-learning is such a big part of that process because the more you can learn and know and understand yourself, the less likely you are to find yourself in this situation again, right? You're going to be able to learn so much about yourself, which is only going to improve every future relationship, work environment, career choice, whatever it is. You're going to be able to make it even better than you could have before because of everything that you've learned through the experience. Is it pleasant? No, I'm not lying. It's not a pleasant experience, but again, I think we have to focus on the silver lining, right? And think about the progress that you're able to make and just the in-depth understanding and learning of yourself that you're able to walk away with.
And, I'm not going to say I'm a whole person yet. Like I'm still going through certain, I'm still healing and I probably will
Yeah.
be for a very long time.
Yep.
I can say though, on the other side, after doing the work, my life is so much richer. I'm,
Hmm.
I may have gone to the depths of trying to take my own life.
Hmm.
What I'm grateful for and truly grateful for is I went through it and now I get to change the narrative
Hmm. Yep.
and speak out where before I would never have said anything and
Hmm.
speak to women like yourself and speak to men who have been bullied by women and really get to show them there is more to your life than that person.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening to you is not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve respect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think the other thing too, and we'll keep talking in different times. So I'll share my personal story eventually. But, when I went through what I went through, one of the silver linings that I said while I was healing and doing the work after is that going through what I went through gave me a sense of empathy that I would not have otherwise had for other people, that now I'm able to pay it forward by coaching and helping, people in this situation with an empathy that I didn't have before. So would I choose to go through it again? Probably not, but I did. And so I want to take that and, use it for a positive, which is exactly what you're doing. And that's why I respect it so much. I think,
Oh,
you're paying it forward and you're sharing.
thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. And yes, we have some exciting news, which will come later because Dr. Amber Bartlett will be joining us again on Flamingo Up, and there'll be more of that to come later. So for now, though, I just want to thank Dr. Amber Bartlett for being here. Everybody, have you ever felt confused or hurt by a workplace friendship that turned toxic? You are not alone. Join the Be Heard group on Facebook to connect with women who understand what you are going through. It is a safe space to share your experiences, ask questions, and learn strategies to rise above workplace challenges. Simply search for Be Heard on Facebook and request to join. It's free, and I cannot wait to welcome you. As we wrap up, remember that there is a clear difference between healthy competition and toxic friendships. Healthy competition lifts you up, while toxic relationships can drain your confidence and leave you questioning your worth. Recognizing these dynamics and taking control is the first step to thriving at work and protecting your peace. Thank you, Dr. Amber Bartlett, and everybody for spending time with me today on Flamingo Up. You have the power to rise, reclaim your voice, and thrive. Flamingo Up is all about standing tall, owning your space, and handling life's challenges with grace, just like a flamingo. If today's episode spoke to you, I want to hear from you. As I said, join the Be Heard group on Facebook and let us continue this conversation. We will also have information on how you can contact Dr. Amber Bartlett in the show notes. So just pop down and take a look at those. So before you go, I would love for you to take a moment to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Follow Flamingo Up on Spotify if that's your favorite podcast platform. Share this episode with a friend, colleague, or anyone who could benefit from it. The more we share, the more women we can empower together. Finally, do not miss next week's episode, The Impact of Workplace Tension on Your Mental Health. It will be a heartfelt discussion you will not want to miss. Until then, keep flamingoing, gorgeous. I will see you next time, and I am your resident sparkle sidekick.